lovely friends on YouTube, and today we're going to have a book review of all the books that I've read the last 3 months. So this is my summer book review. I'm trying to get through 50 books this year. So since my spring book review, I've read 15 more books. You're going to get a variety today. I have some pre-readings, so some of these are books that I've read for my children, books that we've read out loud, some books that are nonfiction, some books that are fiction, a couple audiobooks, so definitely a variety. And hopefully after this video, you'll come away with maybe 1 or 2 books that you want to read for yourself or ones that you think your children would enjoy. So stay tuned for today's summer book review. So first, before I start reviewing what I've read the last couple months, I would love to hear what you've read. Share just maybe your favorite book. If you have one that maybe you didn't care for it, let us know why you didn't care for it. But I would really like to hear your suggestions. I definitely have taken them to heart for those that shared their recommendations on my last book review. So I'm always trying to look for good books for me to read. This has been a way that I encourage mother culture in my own life. I think that we can encourage each other to, always be improving our education, whether that's nonfiction or even fiction, because living books also teach us so many things, even as adults. And so we never stop learning, right? Can I get an amen? So the first book that I'm going to share with you guys today is actually an old book. It is called Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So this is by Thomas Hardy. This is the first book I've ever read of him. This was on actually my sister picked this up at the thrift store for me. Sometimes when we're thrift shopping, we will also look for books for each other. I don't know if you do that with friends, or I'll look for books like that maybe someone else in our homeschool local community could use. My sister picked this one up for me because she thought I would really enjoy it. And I've actually purchased another Thomas Hardy book, and from now on when I go to library sales, I'm going to try to get the rest of his books because I thought this was wonderful. I think his writing was incredible, so beautiful, so descriptive. I really felt like I just saw England alive. The way that Jane Austen brings out personal characters, I felt like Thomas Hardy did a really good job with descriptive scenery. I guess almost like, now that I've also read Dickens, I would say kind of like that same, it's just that Victorian, I think, time period. Beautiful book, beautiful story. It's a bittersweet ending. I don't want to tell you the ending. It's not necessarily like a fairy tale ending, but it is still beautiful in its own right. But it's about a young girl who the family she's kind of in puts her in a situation where she's compromised and then is soiled as a female, especially during that time. And then she falls in love, and she kind of keeps her past a secret. Of course, secrets come out. They have ways of coming out. And so it's just kind of like that story, how her true love, takes that news and basically rejects her, but she just continues to love him and go about her life. And then eventually, full circle, he comes back. But I don't want to tell you the ending. I would definitely recommend this book. It was long, but it was so good. I read it in like 4 or 5 days. Even though it's a beast of a novel, I was consumed by it. It was so good and incredible. I read this back in April. So I did do these chronologically the way I read them. And so this is one of the first books I read since my last book review. 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, I guess I would say for books. Very good. Definitely would recommend that. Okay, and then I finished Home Education, and now we are reading Parents and Children. Charlotte Mason is absolutely the best books you can read as a parent, as a mom, whether you homeschool or not. Home Education is really about how we can teach our children from ages 0 to 9. A good emphasis really in the early years. So this is very helpful for mothers even before their kids are in school. So from like 0 to 6 years old, just how to cultivate habits, the importance of, being the parent, where your authority comes from. It does dive into the basic educational subjects later on in the novel. I would say like the first half is like a parenting book, and then the second half is like more like homeschool, as in home education, and different subjects and how to go about, how to approach them, to prevent your children, to help your children love and enjoy education and not get burned out. This is now my top recommended book. I would say for the child's sake, if you're brand new to homeschooling, and if you want to do this and you want to homeschool, then home education is my top recommendation at this point. But now I'm reading Parents and Children, and I'm like 150 pages in, and I'm like, I don't know. Parents and Children is really good as well. So I think that I will always have a Charlotte Mason novel in my rotation at this point, just because I think they're so rich with wisdom for us as moms. So the next two were books that I read to my children. So this one is on the Ambleside Online Year 2 reading list. It also makes a great family read aloud. This is The Wind and the Willows. This is not the abridged version. This is the full version, The Wind and the Willows. It is long chapters, so we broke these up into like half chapters. It took us a little longer than the term that it was scheduled for, but it was really fun. We enjoyed Mr. Toad, Mr. Ratty, the mole, and the characters. I think there's actually a video. When we were reading this back in like April and May, I wanted to look up the video and then I forgot about it. So I think there's a video you can watch after you're finished that I remember as a kid. But they grow so much. Those three animals, especially Mr. Toad, grow so much in this book, and you really just get to see that growth in his character and how his friends, even the badger and the mole and Ratty, and how they help him, they help ground him, they help keep him accountable. It is just a really good story about friendship and how that can really improve, I think, each other's lives. So, and some hard lessons Mr. Toad learned, but this is a really good book. This is a great one for a read aloud. I would say ages like 8 to 12 would be a good age for that one. Now, Runaway Ralph is part of the Mouse and the Motorcycle series, so we did this one as a read aloud. This is a great read aloud for younger ages. Now, my 10-year-old at the time, she loved this book too, but the chapters are really short, easy to read, easy to understand, where Wind in the Willows is a more conceptual type book. So this is good for like ages probably like 5 to 9 for a read aloud. And as an independent reader, I would say like ages 8 to 12 would be Runaway Ralph. So we really enjoy those. I don't know if anybody else remembers the Runaway Ralph and the Mouse and the Motorcycle, the movies from like the 90s. I loved those movies. I wish they had good movies like that now. So, and I have some books that were for a book club that I rented from the library. So I don't have them here in our library. It was the Housewitch series. So we read Housewitch book 1, I think in April, for a book club that I'm part of. It was so good. So then I read Housewitch 2, but because this is a new release, I am still on hold at the library for Housewitch number 3. So I think I'm in like 6th in line on one copy. So that is definitely the downside of reading modern new releases. Unless you want to go ahead and like buy the book, you just have to wait in line. So I still don't know what happened. So it's hard to give you like a full review of these books, but Lord willing, in my next video, I will have been able to read book 3 and give you like my synopsis. But Housewitch book 1, the reason it really pulled me in and I read Housewitch book 2 is I've always been fantasy, it's sci-fi too, but fantasy, folklore, anything that's like make-believe, I've always enjoyed it since I was in high school. It's just some of my favorite things. So I really like the concept of magic and all that, but it was a very unique twist to it because the Housewitch is a male, first of all, and he's a house witch. So he like gets his powers by taking care of his home and like protecting his home. And so he ends up being the Housewitch, the kitchen cook of a kingdom and a castle. And the first book is his love story, falling in love with a maiden, and then book 2 is kind of like the plot of this other kingdom that's going to attack him. Anyway, really good, easy read, funny, very clean. No, so many, I think, of the modern fantasy books are, so from what I've heard, are very vulgar and distasteful in terms, if you're not looking for anything that's graphic. So these were very clean. So I feel very comfortable recommending them. If you like, witches and fairies and all of that, and you're looking for something that's kind of fun and light to read, then I would recommend these books. You just have to get them at the library. So then I finished on audio. So on the Audible, I finished the Inheritance series. So I read Brissinger and Inheritance. So that's book 3 and 4 of this series by Christopher Poloni. I read these back in high school, and it was really enjoyable to read them a second time. I think his last one, Inheritance, is just so incredible how he just ties it all together, because to end a trilogy, not even a trilogy, it's 4 books, because he really dragged it out, but to be able to tie it all in at the end, that's really the beautiful part of a story, right? Maybe people can start it out, but can you wrap it up? Can you finish it, end it? So it's a great series. I like those on audiobooks because they're really, really fat. But he recently came out with a new one, and so I wanted to reread the series before I read Murtagh. I think it's Murtagh or Murtagh. My dad actually owns it, so I'm probably just gonna borrow it from him. But Christopher Poloni wrote another book, which I rented from the library, and that one was called The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm. It was a short, novelette of 3 short little books. Very good, just very quick read. I think I read it in a couple days, not nearly as intense as his other 4, but they were more stories in his lands, and you did get to see Aragon and some of the characters kind of come back in a little bit. What I think is he could write so many more books based in his world, just like J.R.R. Tolkien did. I just don't know if Christopher Poloni is at that level of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien literally created a whole world of Middle Earth, and book after story after story after book and story, right? Just amazing. So we'll see if he does more after this. I've heard he's done a few other books, but I stand behind this series. It's great for high schoolers, teenagers. I'm sure my Adelaide will read them eventually when she's in high school. So a reread that was for a book club, I didn't grab because I have the whole collection of the Jane Austen books, but that's Emma. And Emma is funny. It's just a funny book, and I love that type of writing. I think you really can get and appreciate the dialogue, the conversations, Jane Austen's witty humor. I know some people don't get into Jane Austen, but I've read all of her books numerous times and really enjoy them. And I just really like Emma, and I like Mr. Knightley, and I like the other characters as well. And so I think it's a good book. I think if you are wanting to try out Jane Austen books, so you've never read one before, I would start with Pride and Prejudice. But I would put Emma right after that, as far as all of her books. Yeah, so Emma's funny, and I think it's a great read. Okay, so then I have a nonfiction. So this one's called Respectable Sins, and this is by Jerry Bridges. We did this book with our small group at church, and so it's kind of like a book, but then it has questions and answers and group discussions in the back. And this was a very good book for developing your Christian walk, just sanctifying and bringing awareness to the sins that we are okay with in our lives. we, I think, are easily can identify the big bad sins, but sometimes simple things like frustration, worry, anxiety, anger, bitterness, shortness of temper, these things that we kind of just brush off are sins. They are an abomination to our Lord. And so he did a really good job helping bring light, scripture, and awareness to that so that we can ask the Lord to help us see our sins and also help us to do better and work and just pray and ask the Lord to help us in these areas in our lives. So this was a really good book. I definitely think it's one that is good to do with some friends or in a group, just so that you can keep each other accountable and talk about it. But it was very good. Okay, so when I finished the Christopher Piloni series, I needed another audiobook. I do like to have an audiobook just because if I don't want to listen to a podcast or a YouTube video, then I'll just like to listen to a book when I'm folding laundry or if I'm doing some cleaning or washing the dishes or something like that. I like to listen to something. I don't know. What do you listen to when you're doing those things? So I picked out another book on Audible. It was called Illusion by Frank Peretti. I like Frank Peretti. He's like spiritual warfare, kind of like thriller, that kind of thing. So this one was a really good twist. So it's about basically the illusion of his wife coming back to life, but like 30 or 40 years younger. And there is some sci-fi to it because these scientists were working on an experiment to like do like a time machine kind of thing, and they were experimenting on people that were like close to death. And so him and his wife were in a car accident, and she was like, her body was like, she was like an organ donator, so they had taken her off to this secret like science and discovery, and then she comes back like 40 years younger in that same time period and this whole thing. And anyway, it was really good, and I thought the ending was really good. I thought, yeah, it was kind of suspense and interesting, a good audiobook to listen to. And I think, so I actually started another one of his. I'm not getting into it as much, so I might just poop out on it. I hate to start a book and then not finish it, but The Illusion was good, and I would recommend. I thought that was really good, a good story. I officially read my first Charles Dickens. Can you believe it? My first Charles Dickens. I was a homeschool kid, and I'm 35, and this is my first Charles Dickens. And so, A Tale of Two Cities, this was for a book club, and my sister hosted, and it was so good. I love Charles Dickens now, and I want to read all of his books. This was about the during the French Revolution, and just the Paris and England and these, London and these two cities basically, and about some characters in them. It is a love story. It's also a story of sacrifice. And don't read the back of the book. I read the back of the book and I kind of guessed the ending, which definitely was anticlimactic, but it was still really beautiful. I did not guess one of the Nemesis evil characters, I guess you could say. I did not guess their ending, and when their ending happened, I was very satisfied because they were so evil, and I needed that closure. About The Tale of Two Cities, I felt that the Charles Dickens explained really well how the lords and the upper class and the government were really taking advantage of the poor people, and there was definitely an abuse of power happening right before the French Revolution, and he explained that really well. I think he showed the degrading of the two classes and how the abuse of power was there. However, then he showed literally the flip side of that, and how with their revenge and desire for retribution and basically getting back at the rich people for abusing the poor for so long, how in the revolution it went too far, and you literally just flipped the coin and you had the underdog then becoming the abuser and killing innocent people, and you had the guillotine and everything that, and people were just, he showed how people were literally just killed because they were of a family. Last year I read The Scarlet Pimpernel, and that kind of gave me like the English side of a little bit of the French Revolution in fiction. And so it was interesting to read another book in the same time period, and it just really is sad, you know, and there's just no justice, right? The desire of power and revenge, and it just went too far. It was not, if you want to compare the French Revolution with the American Revolution, I find that's very interesting. But the French Revolution was just very bloody, and many people were innocently murdered just because. So it was very sad in that way, but the ending was very good, and it just had a nice ending. So I liked that one. And then I was like, I read Charles Dickens. Well, one of my kids is going to be in Ambleside Online year 5, and she was going to need to read Oliver Twist. I was told there was a murder in the book. I didn't know if my 11-year-old would be able to handle Oliver Twist and just the drama of it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to pre-read that, and that's gonna just, this is why I want to pre-read, is because I want to know if my child, if this is going to be a book that's interesting to a child, my child can handle it, you know, all of the above, right? So Oliver Twist was definitely a dark story, and I think I've heard that a lot of Charles Dickens books are, because they're so, he really hits on like real culture issues that were going on in that time period. And so, you know, you probably know the story of Oliver Twist, and he's an orphan, and his life and how he, you know, is working in the slums, and then, you know, these robbers, and how Providence brings him to a nice family, and how he's taken care of there. And it just kind of shows a really whole circle of all the characters involved, the evil people and the good people. You know, when he's born and he's a orphan, you don't know much about his mother and her family and where she came from and all of that. And so you do at the end, and it is such a beautiful circle. And so even though there are some... Okay, 1 minute. Let me finish this, okay? So even though there are some definitely dark parts about the book, I think that it is a beautiful story, and that my 11-year-old is really going to connect with this book. She's getting older, and so she needs books that I think are going to challenge her. I've read it, and so when she narrates and reads it, we get to talk about it together. So it's not like she's getting thrown out into these ideas and these hard things without someone there to guide her. And so I think this is the next step in her becoming, in her maturity. You know, you have like Oliver Twist, and then you have like Runaway Ralph, right? Totally different. But I do think she's ready, and I think you just have to be the judge of that. A young girl does, older girl does get murdered, but the evil people do get their due. So there's that about that book. Okay, so then my last 2 books are also kid books. This is this is the Burgess animal book, and if you saw my term review, I may have talked about this, but this we read in year 2 with my then 8-year-old. This is a great family book. This is your child's best way to learn about the American animals, in my opinion. I learned so much about American animals, mammals in particular, because we've done the Burgess Bird book. So yeah, it's delightful. It's engaging. They're at the school of Mother Nature and all the different animals, and they're learning about each other, and it's described, you know, and there's pictures. And anyway, the narrating is quite simple for the year 2 students. I personally learned a lot about the animals in North America that I just did not know. And so I think parents should read these books too. But the Burgess Animals book was definitely a 5-star in our house. And then the last one I have for you guys is The Incredible Journey. This was actually for year 4 as one of the literature books, but we read this one as a family, and I will be going over like my plan for this upcoming year as we're wrapping up summer and term 3 and all of that. But a lot of the books that are for literature for whatever year your child is in, because I'm going to have a year 5, a year 3, and a year 1, you can do them as family read alouds. Like, people, if you don't use Ambleside Online, that's okay, but you can use their book list. They have an incredible book list if you're just not sure where to start when it comes to good literature and children and what age. So The Incredible Journey, I actually grew up with Homeward Bound. How many of you guys have seen Homeward Bound, right? This book, the Homeward Bound, I actually think they did a good job with the video, with like the voices and the characters. They did reverse a few, so like the cat is actually a boy, and the bigger dog is actually the younger dog in the book. But yeah, it's definitely a cute read aloud for like ages, 6 to 10 for family. I think that some of the books, like Oliver Twist, obviously I would not read that one out loud as a family, but like The Incredible Journey, for sure, you can definitely read that out loud. I think like Oliver Twist, you're not probably going to read that to your younger children, but then like Incredible Journey, you could read that one to the entire family, right? So take a look at Ambleside, take a look at their list, their literature list, and you might find some really good books that you want to add into your school year this year. So after this spring and the rest, it was June too, so summer, basically spring and summer, I want to read more Thomas Hardy. I want to read more Charles Dickens. I think that those are going to bring a lot of delight and joy into my life and growth, because they are living books, and so even as adults we are learning through them as well. So if you have a favorite from kind of the Victoria era, I would love to know what that is down below, and maybe you got some ideas of books to read today too. So thanks so much, friends, for watching my summer book review. I hope that you guys are enjoying your reading this summer, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.